Welcome to Trial Lawyer Prep. What if you could hang out with trial lawyers and jury consultants? Ask them about connecting with clients and juries more effectively. Then take strategies, tactics, and insights to increase your success. Each week, Elizabeth Leavitt takes an in-depth look at how to regain touch with the everyday world, understand the emotional burden of your clients and juries, and use focus groups in this process. Elizabeth is an experienced trial lawyer, consultant, and founder of Leavitt Law Firm in Austin, Texas. Her goal is to help you connect with juries and clients in order to improve your abilities in the courtroom. Now, here's Elizabeth.
Hi there, Elizabeth here. I wanted to pop in very quickly and give you a quick background on our guest, Ashley Leavitt. She is a lawyer out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. She works with Kohler Trial Lawyer, who they now have offices also in Oklahoma City. They do personal injury and first-party insurance claims. If you want to reach out to Ashley, her information and link will be in the show notes. Hope you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the podcast, Trial Lawyer Prep. I'm your host, Elizabeth Leavitt, and today's episode, I've got a fun guest to come talk about virtual focus groups and opening statements. And we, Ashley Leavitt and I, have done many virtual focus groups together. So she is going to be super helpful to talk us about her experience. And then we will walk through kind of a case example for a format that we do together. But Ashley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Zooming all the way from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
That's right.
One of the nice benefits of doing virtual, right? You just pop on and get one done with some Oklahoma folks and then move on with your day.
Yes. And despite the weather, it might be cold where I'm at or warm, depending, but today it's nice.
Yes. And typically what I always tell people when I, checking in with my guests in Montana, wherever they're from, like, okay, what's the weather like? But I know springtime, because this is when we're recording this, is like the most hectic time, I would say, for Oklahoma weather.
Yes. We are in the midst of truly spring, where it can be all four seasons in one day and your allergies are going crazy.
And possibly a tornado, maybe me not. I remember my time of living there just thinking like, oh, it's always such a treacherous time, but it is nice when it warms up. So, and it's even busier for you right now because you guys are doing a lot of property claims, right?
Yes. And with the way that insurance companies like to set up their statute of limitations, we have about a year before we get an influx of claims. So I can write down, oh, there was hail today. And a year from now, I'm going to be busily drafting petitions.
Yes. So anyone listening in Oklahoma, or you have family in Oklahoma and go through a storm, remember Ashley or contact me in the show notes in that 1 year statute, because I know it's different all over the place. So
right.
Good, already piece of good nugget to tell us. So let's talk about what you're here to talk about, which is virtual focus group. So just from off the bat, like you've done in person before, doing virtual, what do you like? What are the pros and cons for you?
I definitely, the first thing off the bat from going from in-person focus groups to virtual is the need for less icebreakers. People come in to a in-person focus group and they all don't really want to talk. They're not really sure about it. It's, in a lawyer's office or somewhere else that they feel might be kind of fancy. And so it just takes a little while to get people talking. And the first case that is up or discussion that starts, I don't feel like you get quite the same amount as the last one of the day. But virtual, people are appearing from the comfort of their own home and they're not face-to-face with someone. And I just don't even notice the need for an icebreaker. They just kind of pop in and they're ready to talk. That's what they're there for.
Yep, absolutely. And they don't have to go anywhere, which always, like lately, that's what I'm hearing from my participants is like, please don't make me get in a car and drive somewhere. And, we were talking a little bit before we started. And one of the things too, that you pointed out that I love to also point out to people is like, you get such great facial recordings of every single person.
Yes. Every person is sitting square in front of a camera. So there's a camera directly on their face, and you can have in your in-person focus groups, you could have multiple angles of cameras. You'll be hard pressed to put a camera in front of every single person's face. And they're sitting in the same room as the other participants. And so they're less likely to use body language When we have the virtual focus group and one person is talking, you'll actively see other people shaking their heads or nodding along in agreement. I don't feel like that really happens in the same room very often.
And from a like a moderator perspective or like just observing the focus group perspective, you can't even catch that with your eye. But when everyone's in a Brady Bunch box, like it's so much easier for eye to catch like, oh, they're agreeing with that. Let me go over there then and ask, like, hey, I saw you nodding along. It's much easier to see some of those little, even just the slightest amount of body language.
Exactly. And I found that when I was trying to take notes about what certain people were making reactions to, I'd scribble down, Elizabeth rolled her eyes. Well, at what? I don't remember anymore. And I am less focused on trying to take notes when I know that this is all being recorded and I can see it again. I'm going to be able to rewind it and notice that. And I'm able to really fully just be a observer during the virtual focus group, knowing that I'm going to have an opportunity to see it again if I want to, but I get to watch it unfold as opposed to trying to take notes.
That's such a huge point. I mean, it's such a huge point. Tell me a little bit more like what you get out of just being able to sit and observe it unfold.
Well, so again, it's not so much that you're trying to note, okay, this person shook their head or this person exhaled when I said this or whatever. I really got to focus on my delivery of my opening statement as opposed to, checking in, how am I doing? Do I need to adjust? I'm really just delivering it the way that I want to, knowing that I'm going to get to watch the reactions back and not worried about that, not trying to make a note, not trying to make necessarily adjustments in that moment, because I'll be able to see how they react to me later.
It goes down to the basic things. Our brains really can only do one thing at a time. And if you are so honed in on taking a note about something, you are going to miss what you just said, the unfolding, because being able to watch everybody, especially with virtual, their faces, and just being able to just take it all in and process it and then listen to everybody really intently is it's a great thing to do on the first go round. Because what I find is then when I go to the second go around or when I just read the transcript, it comes so much full circle in your mind and you get so much out of it because you're going to get, ideas are going to be flowing when people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. And sometimes it's just better to write down the idea than it is to be like, Fred said yes to, question one. Like it's going to be, oh, wow, what about that idea? And then that idea, because that's really because that may never come back.
That's true.
The idea may never come back.
And the point you just made with the transcript, nobody's typing up a transcript when you do it live. And so the transcript comes through, which is fantastic. And it eliminates so much need for you to try and take notes that you can really just sit there and watch. And I will sit here with a paralegal and we'll be like, this one gets it. She gets it. She's with us. Just wait. When she starts talking, she's going to be with us. And then see what she says. So it just makes it a lot more fun as opposed to, just scrambling to try and get the most out of it that you can. I mean, you get a lot out of it because you can always refer back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say also, the way that y'all do them, Ashley's partner is Lori Kohler. When we do them in these smaller time fragments, either an hour and a half, or sometimes 2 hours, like that's so manageable for you to go back and watch it, even if you speed it up. Yes. It's so much manageable for you to be able to go back and rewatch it.
Right. Yeah. Even if you fast forward through some people that you're like, I wasn't a big fan of this one. So we'll just scoot forward about a minute, let her not talk anymore.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I will tell you, truthfully, that's one of the reasons why, whenever we do a focus group together, I always ask for feedback. And, we have these forms that people give feedback on. And Ashley's feedback on one of the forms was that she didn't like the focus group. So I was like, oh, okay, we got to go back in and talk about this. So, and it was an opening statement focus group. So tell us, in a very general, what were a little bit of the facts about the case? And then how come you guys were ready to do an opening focus group?
So the facts of this case, pretty standard for us. Half of our practice is suing insurance companies directly for breach of contract and the breach of the duty of good faith and fair dealing after they've refused to replace roof and other damaged property after hail and windstorms. That's just pretty general. Everyone has different facts, but in general, they're all the same in that sense. So this particular case, I was so excited about, and I had been working on it for about a year and really developing that there was all these really bad faith facts there. Most of the time, I want to make arguments for bad faith, and courts shut me down consistently. But this one, I just knew. We were in state court, so our standard was better off. And I had all of these just bizarre facts that I loved this case and I loved telling people about it. So we were coming up on a trial date. I was supposed to try that case in January of 2024. And this was, I think we did our first opening statement in November of 2023 on this case. So it was coming up about 2 months away. I was really excited about it. I made a PowerPoint that I was going to potentially use at trial because I knew it was fact heavy and I wanted to give a visual so that they could follow along. Well, I told this focus group every single bad faith fact that I had. I told it in order. This is what happened. And then this was what happened. And then can you believe that they determined through their engineer that birds ate the roof? And, I just kept building on all of these crazy facts. And I sit back and I'm watching, and they had no idea what I said. The only thing that they remembered was the very first inspector didn't get on the roof. He just leaned the ladder up against the house and climbed to the top of the ladder and pointed his camera up over the eaves and took pictures that way. He didn't get on the roof. And I was like, but you didn't remember that the birds ate the roof. You didn't remember, all of these other crazy, interesting, like slap yourself in the forehead facts that I thought, I for sure am going to get this huge verdict. So basically they were like, no, you're a dork. We don't understand why you're so excited about this. And I don't follow it. So frustrating.
Hence the review.
I tried very hard not to. That was not a Google review where it was public.
I know. Well, no, of course not. It's internal, but I was just like, oh, okay. Well, but then I realized like naturally we run the focus, Ashley does roofing and then I come in and ask questions and it's all these other facts, but there's a good level of confusion. And it really came down to, okay, you had some visuals, but we needed some other visuals to kind of give them more perspective and ideas. And we got some really good things, but from that focus group, but I think also it was just a little bit like, oh,
you really interpreted it well for me because I was just so defeated about it and got my feelings hurt, really, if I'm being honest, that they weren't on the same page as me and they didn't see it like I saw it. And so I had a hard time coming up with, I just don't know what I could do better. And you were like, well, here, let's try this. And so you started me on this path and you pointed out different things that different people said that led to that. And so I was able to make a lot of changes and I really just tried to simplify it. Even though there was a whole bunch of juicy facts that were going to come out later during the trial, we just decided it wasn't best in an opening statement because it just left them so confused.
Right. And one of the things I think that really kind of stood out that a lot of lawyers come to find out about is how powerful is the other expert. And we found out like just by dropping the word engineer, okay, there's a lot of power behind that, and you just made a really good point too, which is selecting the facts for opening versus waiting for, later development when you have more time and more like cross-exam, like that kind of stuff. Which again, I still though feel like we came back and tested him again. Like, okay, let's put him back in there because he's the big, one of the biggest things they rely on. And so you refashioned it and came back. But we, like I said, we did hear some really good things, but we also you're really disappointed by it. And I think what also wanted to give kind of, people listening a perspective of this whole, one of the biggest facts that we heard from nearly every participant was about like how crazy it was that the very first person who showed up to look at the house never got on it. Well, this was a 4,000 square foot roof, y'all. We're not talking about like, a small residential home. This was a big home. And they had that house and they had two other outbuildings, large outbuildings again.
Right.
And so to them, they just were like, wait a second, what? So helpful to know, like, okay, this is a juicy fact. Like you didn't think it's so juicy. Let's give it back to them. So that was a big one. And then also, again, kind of the visual concept of, and then the learning piece. Because that's the other thing too, is, when people are so confused, you're like, okay, do I need to simplify, or are they just lost because they don't know how a shingle roof works?
Right.
It was a little both.
Right. That's exactly it. And I think, well, I'm not a roofer, but I have been working these types of cases for about 3 years. And so I tell everyone at this point I could be a supervisor at least.
Oh, yeah.
Joke, because I can't get on a roof. I'm too scared of heights. But, it was just interesting to really focus on that one thing that they kept going back to, which was the first bad faith fact I gave them. He didn't even get on the roof. I see that all the time in a lot of claims. And I just have been numbed to that fact, but it stood out to them. And so I leaned on that in the second round.
Mm-hmm. And I think we also had people, like, we were kind of missing, like, you had the facts, like you had this kind of juicy story where it's like they were disbelieving the client, but the client had literally visual, video, and footage documented, like, can't dispute, like, we couldn't make this up kind of stuff. And that was such a like, oh, okay, we know we have this thing, and they kind of hit on it, but it was like, okay, we're still not aligning this in a way where it's just like, wow, like, how could they say? And we just had bombarded them with so much stuff. So it was like, okay, let's come back and try it again. And so you came back for the second one. And what did you do to prepare for the second virtual focus group?
I cut a lot. I cut just a lot of facts out. And I remember there was something to do with, to me, these big holes on the shingle roof. It's clearly hail damage, clearly based on the video that we have showing the hail pelting down at this residence on the day in question. And that first focus group was like, but is that it? I don't know what hail damage looks like. And I'm like, really? Like, you don't just assume that that's hail damage? What do you think it would be? And so we did some more explanation of roofing procedures and how many hail hits per test square it takes to total a roof. And we put a visual up there for them to understand. And it didn't even seem like an issue at all for the second group.
Mm-hmm.
That was hail damage.
One of the things too that I think we forgot to talk about that you made sure to mention was people had this impression that, like, if it is damaged, therefore it leaks. Like, that was what they were looking for. So if they hadn't replaced it, it had been so long, is it leaking? And so it was like, okay, put that in your opening. And I remember you made sure to talk about how they would not have known that. You put that in there, like they couldn't have known it was leaking because of the way the roof was made with some seal stuff or something.
Right. And that's part of the insurance company's denial, was this cosmetic damage exclusion, saying that if it were to be damaged, in order for it to be covered, there would have to be leaks. But this particular house had 12-inch spray foam insulation underneath the roof. So for my clients to know that they had a leak, that water would have to penetrate through 12 inches of insulation. It was, and I will tell you, since then, the case has resolved. The clients have a new roof and they had to redo all of that insulation as well because it's moldy, just like we expected. But, without getting in there and destroying things, we couldn't prove that. And you're asking our clients now to cut a hole in their roof to prove that they need a new roof. That's just crazy. But having that, I don't even think I had to put a picture of the spray foam insulation into the slide, just telling them how it was made. Just made the difference for them. I just don't feel like it was an issue at all. I don't remember it being an issue at all for the second group.
It wasn't. Yeah. And I think because we had one of the things, of course, was like, how would you know? And what questions do you have? And like, we made sure and kind of, okay, this is a big one. Multiple people are asking this. So that was definitely something that you put in there. So refashioned it, put some more emphasis on the roofs things, answer some questions. How did you feel like the second virtual focus group went?
The second one was good for my ego. Gave me that little confidence that I needed when the mediator came calling and said, hey, they're wanting to talk more settlement again. And so it was a nice confidence booster before trial. I mean, we were, I think, a week and a half from trial by the time we settled, maybe even less. So I thought I was going. And when the case settled, I was heartbroken. But it needed to happen.
Yeah. Well, and I think even after your second one, you got good feedback again. And then I think we still said, okay, this is still a thing with the engineer. Like, this is still a thing that's just not really coming through all the way. It needs more development. Let's, make sure and put that in cross exam, but, put it in there as some kind of excuse fashion.
Right. Yeah. I did learn that I did not have an engineer on this case, and they did. And I didn't feel at the beginning of the case that I needed one, because the engineer's conclusion was because there was bird poop on the roof within 2 inches of a hole in the roof, that therefore birds were eating the roof because they burrow from the ridge of a roof down, which is ridiculous. And I just thought everyone would understand that, and that this engineer meant nothing. But I found out that just because he's an engineer, he holds some weight. So that was interesting and disheartening. But I'm definitely moving forward with that information on every other case that I have too. Engineer
really good
something
point.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
That it's going to repeat itself.
Right. Exactly. And that's what's really nice about these focus groups too, is even though that was specific to that one case, like I said at the beginning, all of our cases are pretty similar. They're all denied roof replacements from insurance companies because of weather-related events.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think the other thing too that you guys were testing in both of them were kind of the fraud aspect, because,
Right.
that's always an underlying theme for the insurance company. And it's, as we saw in both groups, there were people who were just like, well, there's a lot of people out there who, just want a new roof. So it's fraud. And it was just like, okay, well, here's all the things that, and I think by the time you got to the second one, like, here's all the things they did to,
Right.
follow the rules, to show the damage, and still we're,
I completely forgot about that. So the first focus group on this particular case, they had a prior claim within a year before this incident, and they had gotten a new roof the day of the storm. The day that this were actually was the day before the storm happened. They had a new roof on one of the 3 buildings, and then the storm happens and they deny the claim again. So their first claim with this insurance company was denied. Eventually they paid it, but it turned it into this dramatic thing where they ended up having to do a lot more repairs because of the spray foam insulation issue. And so when they made the second claim, they were really not expecting their insurance company to do the right thing, because they'd already had this previous experience. And I, as an attorney, am going, that's pattern and practice. That's bad faith. Yeah. And the first focus group hated it because they decided that my clients were litigious and just constantly making claims and wanting new roofs. And that wasn't it at all. And so even though I felt like it was a huge, point that I could make in my bad faith claim, we decided to completely forego it. And we did not talk about the prior claim at all. And that was my intention going into trial. We were not going to bring up the prior claim at all, even though the same adjuster that adjusted the second one had adjusted the first claim. We just decided to scrap it altogether. That was a huge part of what I thought my claims were going to be, but it really made the difference. It really did.
Yeah, there weren't as many people. I think y'all know there's always going to be somebody in the crowd who says, oh, well, but that particular fact was like, oh, they've already had a claim before? Like, oh, and also I think one of the things too, from the first to the second one was we had a lot of people in the first one say, well, I mean, how old was the roof? Because if it's an older roof, they should just go ahead and replace it. But if it's brand new, well, they used me trying to get a new roof. So in the second one, you made sure and said, okay, here's a picture of the, beautiful home with the roof, and it was built in this year. And but yeah, completely left out the other claim altogether.
Right. That's probably the biggest thing I learned from that focus group. And here I am a couple months out and I'd already forgotten.
No, you're fine. And that's kind of how kind of comes back to you as well. Cause there were other facts that were in the first one where it was like, because we wanted to see what is it that they need to kind of not bolster them, but what's something they can lean on as we're doing our job, we're telling insurance everything. And they had hired their own private adjuster. And I want to say, I don't know if we talked, I think we dropped it in there, but that concept alone was just what? Mind blown. We don't know what this is.
Right. That no one from the insurance company, no one who was directly employed from the insurance company ever went to the property to inspect. There were 3 different inspections in that one. And it was a third-party adjuster. Then it was just somebody hired to take photos, and then it was an engineer, and none of them were employed by the insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that is common. So for me, working these cases for 3 years and being around dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, that's so common, but people did not like that.
Yeah. And they just didn't know. I mean, that's, I think people who had a lot of experience kind of knew, but I mean, it's just one of those things that we take for face value of like someone shows up at your house. I'm with, X insurance company. You're like, okay, here, like, we just assume that you're, employed by them, but they're just not at all. So, I mean, it was definitely lots of really good feedback. And then again, being able to do them back to back. And we didn't like, you put in, here's what the defense is going to say. And then, we try to do some questions about it, but we didn't put a defense opening in there because didn't really need one for the purpose of what you guys were doing, because it was like, okay, keep testing. Because even after that second one, we talked about, okay, how could you then tweak and change and refashion it to get it ready? So even though I know you settled, did you feel like the opening statement was pretty well set?
Yes, absolutely. I felt like after the second one, I sat there and I watched them all talk about how great my case was and how I was probably going to get such a high verdict. And I was nodding along, and they're telling me what they found most egregious. And it was just kind of a check, 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 check. Now I feel really good about where we're at. And then once you have your opening, it's everything else just falls in line. So I felt very prepared to go to trial after that.
Mm-hmm. How did you feel about the numbers? Because I know the numbers were a little bit like different than what people would normally expect for roof claims.
So they did have a little bit of an issue with my contractor numbers because I had a public adjuster and I had a contractor, and the numbers are different. But I didn't even put in, I don't think I put in the public adjuster number on the second. And they were picking apart my contractor number because it was an extremely high amount. Like you said before, it's a 4,000 square foot home plus two, and that was an asphalt shingle. And then there was 2 outbuildings that were metal roofed. And so the total that I had, which was actually an old estimate that I showed them, was like $123,000. And that's the actual damages. And so we're asking for more than that. And these people just couldn't fathom that that's how much a roof cost. And I mean, that was a real estimate. That's the real quote of what it would have cost at the time it was written. So that was a little bit scary to get past. But then in the end, I think all of them, said more than what the estimate was.
We're frantically talking, texting to each other because I was like, what was all this included? And so I think once they understood, like, okay, it's roofs, but it's also the trim pieces and
Guttering
and guttering and garage doors and they're like, oh, okay, well that made them feel a little better.
Yes. The hot tub cover. Oh my goodness. The video was of the hail pelting the hot tub cover, and the insurance company waited until 2 years after the claim to pay for that. So
yeah, it was, I mean, and we talked about, okay, like how can we, of course, a jury in Oklahoma is going to understand this so much more because they're all going to have experienced having gone through a hailstorm, but then at least their cars or, some kind of damage. But the size difference between what he had in his hand in that picture versus what, the engineer said hit their house, like it was
correct.
Such a drastic difference, but you couldn't convey that verbally. Like I was like, okay, you're going to have to get something. Go
Right.
get something from Hobby Lobby or something to show them like, this is what we're, so lots of good ideas. But overall, like what was your kind of big takeaways from kind of doing both of the virtual focus groups for this case?
My big takeaway on this was that focus groups are so necessary because I thought that I had this case in the bag. I thought I understand these facts forwards and backwards, and I've been living and breathing this case and been so excited about it. And I don't need to refer to my notes at all. I can talk about this case ad nauseum. And that is not what's going to get a jury to understand the claim. And so if I hadn't had that experience, well, I certainly would have gone to a jury and given an opening statement in a different way that a jury probably was not going to follow. So even though I had thought it was really simplified and that a jury was going to just follow along with me, that I was going to be leading them down the path. They just were not as excited as I was, and they didn't get on board. So I had to make it a whole lot easier in order to get them on board. And part of that was cutting out things that I thought were really important, that my clients thought were really important, and having that conversation with them in preparation for trial, like, this is what we have to do. So really, as cliche it is to say it, focus groups are so necessary because we just live and breathe this all day long and think that everybody's going to be with us, but we have to remind ourselves that of where we were or where the average person is, not knowing anything about these types of claims or the legal implications or conclusions or anything else that goes along with the claim. Like, we've got to take it back to a baseline knowledge and give them breadcrumbs so that they can follow along.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm curious, did you talk to your clients about the feedback?
I did. My clients those particular clients were more involved than the average client, I would say. They're self-described gamblers. And most of my clients do not want to go to trial. Like, that is the ultimate, like, nope, I would rather settle for less than what this claim is worth than go to trial. Not these clients at all. They actually had experienced a jury trial before, years before, for a different issue, not because they're litigious, but they're just willing to fight the good fight for what is right in their mind. And so they were very much wanting to be involved. They were very much wanting that first claim to be introduced as evidence. And so I did have to talk to them about the focus group. I told them that I was going to do the focus group before I did it. And then afterwards, I talked to them about what I learned and what we were now going to pivot towards for trial. So they were on board with it because they trusted me and I was able to explain why, but that's not what they wanted to originally do. They wanted to talk about the first claim.
Yeah. You just nailed it. Like, if you are a lawyer and you're going to explain the implications of a focus group, because I've got a pretty strong opinion about, like, not having people watch them live, like, never have your, especially like personal injury clients or even really any client, because they can't really fathom what's happening other than it feels like a constant personal attack.
Right.
They're really close to the case. You think we're close, like,
Yes.
they're super close. So, like, I love the way you always got like, hey, this is what we're doing. We want to test it with a group of people who know nothing about it, right? Like, these could be potential jurors, and then going back and saying, okay, here's what we heard, but here's what that means for the case. And really, why are they saying it? Right. So being able to really give the full picture, because a lot of times people say, well, hey, we focus grouped your case. They hated it, sorry, we're going to settle it. Or, you know what I mean? Like, because they're like, well, why? I don't understand. Like, because then they'll still be stuck in their mindset of, like, I need that for, like, they need to know the injustice that I had. And it's like, oh, actually, like, that fuels the fire for this whole other, like, fraudster thing that we are trying to tamp down that could get out of hand. And we'd turn around and get, a zero verdict and not understand. And the jurors have been like, oh, they're just fraudsters. Like, huge thing to really learn in a focus group and not in the courthouse.
Exactly. And I did not have my clients watch the video, and I didn't give them quotes or anything just because I didn't think it was necessary. They understood what I was trying to tell them when I explained it to them. So I didn't feel the need to share that. I've never had a client watch a focus group at this point. There may be a time when I need to, but I have enough rapport with my clients that I'm able to tell them, communicate what I learned and how I'm using that. And this is where we're going because of this focus group. So
yeah, so helpful. I mean, because a lot of people, I think sometimes we get excited, and sometimes it's hard to, like, translate that into, like, okay, we had to get this information in, then we had to dissect it and process it and put it into the action plan for the case. And then, if it's against what the client wants, or, you know what I mean, like, getting them on board, they kind of have to go through that process on their, like, themselves with the information you give them.
Right. I had already gotten over my hurt feelings. I didn't need to coach them through theirs.
Oh, that's funny. Awesome. Well, let me ask you one other question. Then I know I want to respect your time, but if there's somebody out there who's listening who's just not really sure whether virtual is the way to go or not, like, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, especially if they've already done a focus group that was live, a virtual one, it's so much better than the live because the camera on somebody's face that you get to watch back over and over and over. and all of the audio that picks up, the transcript that you get that types it all out for you. Like all of those things are just compounded on top of, the benefits that that you'll get from a live focus group or in-person focus group. But if you haven't done a focus group at all, then you're missing what the average person thinks about your case. And these simple little things that are like, duh, Ashley, why didn't you know that? But I mean, it took a focus group for me to realize those things. So it puts cases into the perspective of a juror, what a juror is going to think about it. And there's multiple thought processes, and you get those in the focus groups, and you get those people arguing with you. So or arguing with themselves, each other, and you'll know what deliberations are going to be like.
Yeah. Even if it is guided. I mean, and we've had you guys have brought some unusual cases where it's just been like, wow, I was not anticipating like this kind of discussion. I guess maybe I should have, but I mean, you guys just have some cases that have like several layers to it. And it's hard to know like which layer is going to catch with people and then which way people, like with their experience, they're going to talk about it. So,
right. And we've had some fun ones.
Yeah, that's for sure. Ashley, well, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope that I was able to communicate a little bit about why I think it's so important to have these virtual focus groups. And I appreciate so much your willingness to have me on and to keep dealing with me with focus groups and our crazy cases.
It is always fun to work with you guys. And I always enjoy, like, we've got a different one. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Let's see what they say. So it's always a good time. So, it's always helpful just to give your thoughts and feedback. And, you were disappointed, and that's going to happen. And like, you came back for another round, even though it was disappointing.
Yes. I wouldn't have done that with a lot of people. So I don't even fully remember the review that I gave the focus group, but
well, I think it was like on a scale of 1 to 10, and it was not a 10. So I was like, oh no, like it was not a personal.
No, nothing to do with the process, everything to do with my disappointment in myself. But we fixed it. So that's what matters.
We did. So awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know everyone appreciates hearing your experience.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you have a property damage claim, Ashley's contact information is going to be in the show notes. Or if you have questions about her experience with virtual focus groups, I know she'd be happy to answer questions, as would I. So as you may have heard, I do virtual focus groups. So if you are interested in a virtual focus group or are curious about how may able to help your case, just set up a free consultation call. That link will be in the show notes. Otherwise, please like, review, follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, thank you.